I fix my eyes on Christ.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is Colton. I like to talk about Bibles, books, and theology-related things. Today, I have a little bit of a different video for you in that I'm going to be talking about something that I always sort of keep an eye on. I've been in the ministry for as long as I can remember. All my adult life has been my main vocation. And something I always try to make myself aware of is, why are pastors leaving? Why are they quitting? I want to say, if you're out there and you're a brother who has formerly been in the ministry and you're not anymore, first off, I want to acknowledge our identity is found in Christ, not in our vocation. Our vocation is part of that identity, but this is in no way some sort of attack against brothers who have left the ministry. It's just something I think about often. I'm like, what is behind this? What's causing this and all that? So if that's you and I just want to encourage you, brother, press into Christ continually. You don't have to be a pastor to be a Christian. Delight in just simply serving the church in other ways and being a part in other ways. But it's always been a curiosity of mine, and I stumbled across this study from the Barna Group, and it's from March of 2022, where they did a survey of pastors. As far as I know, these were questions given to guys who are still in the ministry but have considered quitting, and the headline is Ministry Challenges by Pastors who have considered quitting. This is probably going to be a little bit longer of a video because I want to go through all of these and just talk about them with you, give you some of my thoughts, and let's kind of dig into what's really going on there. I think these things are important for all Christians to be aware of, not just pastors. Let's get into it, and I'm going to count this down from the least to the greatest. Now, given there's also a percentage here at the very bottom that's 21% to say it's because of something else. And we're not going to try and define that right now. We'll dive into that after we go through the rest. But the very smallest number at the bottom just says none of the above. So none of these reasons that they potentially have considered quitting. The lowest one on the totem pole is, I don't feel respected by those outside the church, which is an interesting reason. I mean, I guess maybe in the community that you're in, if those outside the church aren't respecting you, or maybe this is coming from a place of just struggling with the fact that you're a Christian and you're feeling the outside pressures of being a Christian. That's something to kind of dive into a little bit and just go, following Jesus, whether you're a pastor or not, was never promised to be easy. He told us that we would be hated by those outside of his church. Absolutely true, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that one because I don't really know a ton about what to say. The next one up, and by the way, I'll have this thing linked down below so you can check it out for yourself. But the next one is, and it also has 6%, ministry is not what I thought it would be. That one, I think, hits home for people because you get this idea that being in ministry in this pastoral context is just all glamorous, and that you're a leader in your church and you get to just enjoy the fruits of that, and there's no problems, or maybe you were expecting something else and you just feel disappointed. This is a reason why, and you probably will hear me say this more than once in this video, but this is a reason why I would argue that we really need to be careful and spend more time in prayer and in our own local churches before we consider stepping into the work of ministry. It is not a work for the faint of heart. It is a very specific work, and it's not often what you think it is on the surface. And this is why elder training is so important. It's why being connected to a local church is so important. They can see the giftings in you and encourage you if they are there. But don't be hasty to run into it thinking it's going to be one thing. Spend some time, talk to some seasoned pastors, ask them about their challenges, really dive into what's going on. And I think that would help with this one quite a bit. All right, the next one up is, and it also has 6% of the survey, I have experienced a personal crisis of faith. So these are people who maybe are deconstructing, people who maybe don't believe what they used to believe. And I'm wondering if this could also include those who maybe they are still Christians, but they've had a change of their core theology in the church that they're in. They can't really continue in that church. You know, an example would be something like if you started serving in a church that practices credo baptism and you all of a sudden you've changed your views to pedo baptism and you can't continue in that same church to serve as a pastor anyway. Or vice versa. You know, we Baptists always feel like we're the butt of the joke as far as people leaving Baptist churches to become pedo Baptists, but it does happen the other way too sometimes. Maybe that's this. Maybe it's more of a deconstruction. I don't know. The next one getting 10% is I feel called to another profession outside of church ministry. And, you know, that's okay. That happens. And sometimes there's just this obvious, you know, Lord, this, you know, you had me here for a season and it was something I needed to do, but now you've made clear that this is actually, this other thing is what you have made me to do. Nothing really crazy about that. That does happen. The next one up getting 12% is I don't feel supported by my staff. That's always, it doesn't matter what line of work you're in. If the people that you work with are difficult or you feel like you don't fit in, it's going to cause those issues. But it can be particularly brutal in church ministry. I think people have this idea, you know, there is a similarity to secular work with that, but the ministry work is just so different from work in the secular marketplace. It's so much more personal. It's so much more intimate. Relationships matter so much more. You know, it's not like when you're in a ministry context for your work, you don't just have to merely get along with people and get through your day. I mean, it's way more intimate, way more relational, and those relationships matter a great deal more. So let's look at the next one up. 19% said, I don't feel equipped to cope with ministry demands. Jumping the gun, thinking it's something that it's not, and getting in there, you know, too soon. I don't know. But as far as being equipped and all that stuff, this is where I would say the number one deal here is to be trained up in a local church by a pastor or the elders there. And then also getting some seminary education and getting some other stuff to help you get prepared for what this work looks like and the demands that are going to come with it. So yeah, I understand that one. That was 19%. The next one up is 21%. And I don't know how these percentages add up to whatever. I don't understand how they're doing it. It's Barna, but you can look at it yourself. It definitely seems like it's definitely more than 100% when it's all together. So not quite sure how they're doing it, but maybe they're crossing categories in some ways. But the next one is 21%, and it's, I don't feel respected by the congregants. This one I totally get. That can be really hard. At the same time, I just want to encourage you out there, if you're thinking of going into pastoral ministry, realize that you're going to have to lead. And when you lead, there will be detractors every single time. There's always detractors. There's always people who are going to have difficulty and cause difficulty with you. And one of the best things you can do is be prepared to lead those people, to lead them into a place where they do respect you. And part of that comes from you loving them and you respecting them even when they're not giving it to you. You intentionally going in there and doing your best to be Christ-like and lead them lovingly. Now, I get it. Some people out there are just never going to get on board. But, yeah, so that one was 21%. I don't feel respected by the congregants. The next one at 22% is just simply, I am not satisfied with my job. Not sure what all that might entail for people if they click that as their response. Maybe it has stuff to do more with the sort of pay scale or something. I'm not sure, but that's what's at 22%. The next one up is 24%, and it is, my church is steadily declining. And that one is hard. I totally get that. It's hard, and maybe some of it feels like it's your fault. Like, I've got to get out of here so someone can come in here who knows what they're doing and really help get this ball rolling. I would just encourage you, if you're having those thoughts, brother, remember that the successful metrics of ministry are not the same as the world, and that there is a degree where you may see this, but you're faithful. You're doing what you're supposed to do. You're doing your job. You're shepherding people. You're preaching the word. You're giving yourself over to it, and it's just not growing. It just may be that season of life and that time. We have to be careful when those thoughts sort of intrude. And then remember, these are people who have not yet quit, but who are considering it. 29%, my vision for the church conflicts with the church's direction. This one, I think there's a lot of reasons why this could happen. Sometimes it can happen in the pastor search itself. Like, you're just, you're not, everything wasn't laid out on the table from either party. Maybe you going in didn't communicate as well where you wanted to go. And maybe the church itself didn't communicate rightly where they are and what they see as where they want to go. Ultimately, the pastor is supposed to lead pastors. I'm a big believer in a plurality of elders, which helps a lot of this stuff kind of, decrease in its efficacy. But yeah, the vision conflict things and all that, I totally get that. What could help with that, honestly, is just earlier on in the process, making things as clear as possible. And sometimes that doesn't matter. I know sometimes the things just aren't what you thought, and it is what it is. The next one, also at 29%, says, I am not optimistic about the future of my church. This one is interesting to me. I think every pastor, if they're honest, can say they felt this way at one time or another, where things just don't seem to be going the direction that you think it should be going. It seems like the future might be bleak. But remember, even in that, sometimes your failure to be optimistic about it is more about your feelings than it is about the truth. Sometimes there's a lot more that can be done than you might not even imagine. Mark Dever has said something to the effect of, and I'll probably butcher this quote, but most pastors overestimate what they can do in 5 years and underestimate what they can do in 10, as far as just leadership and all of that stuff. But relatable, I understand sometimes the optimism just isn't there. We just have to remember not to be slaves to our own thought processes and emotions sometimes and trust the Lord. By the way, I'm not saying that for some of these reasons are not good. Maybe you shouldn't be there anymore. I can't speak. Every individual situation is different, and I can't speak to every specific one, but I'm just trying to look at them in general. The next one also at 29% is, I am unhappy with the effect this role has had on my family. That one stings. When you go into ministry, it's, again, not like any other job. Your family is with you, and the pressures of it and the things that happen around it and the way it works out in your family life sometimes can be overwhelming. Sometimes the answer to that is knowing when to set proper boundaries, knowing when to turn it off, because it's hard to turn off ministry as far as the thought processes and the needs that may arise. But yeah, I get it. The family life aspect of it. The next one is, I think, quite timely and understandable. At 38%, current political divisions. Current political divisions. I don't want to comment too much on it. I think it speaks for itself. It is heartbreaking to see some of the political things that tear up the church, that divide people. We're to come together around Christ and the gospel and his word. And will that, or should that, affect how you view politics? Yes. But I guarantee you that there's no church where all the people 100% agree politically, right? It's just not going to happen. This next one, the second to the top, almost the most cited reason, I feel lonely and isolated. Sometimes ministry can be a lonely place where you feel like you're the only one dealing with the things you're dealing with. You don't have anyone to connect to really share those burdens with and to just pray for one another and all that. I understand that, and it's one of the reasons I'm such a big proponent of connecting with other pastors who you can meet with, who you can call, who know you and you know them, and you're able to be there for one another. That for me has been so crucial, to have other brothers in my life who know what I'm talking about when I share my issues and just needing help and prayer and wisdom. It can be a lonely place, and we have to do the work as pastors of seeking out that fellowship with others who know what we're going through and who can share the burden with us. The very top one might surprise people, but not me. The very top one is the immense stress of the job. And I think so many people look at pastoral ministry as easy mode, as something that, there's the running joke that you only have to work on Sundays, which is just not true. The reality is, again, I keep going back to this, pastoral ministry is unlike any other vocation because it is so deeply relational. You have to spend time around people often, and you have to counsel people through some of their things, and you have to deal with various things that arise in people's lives, and you're burdened with all of the things that your people are dealing with, and it's personal, and it hurts sometimes. And on top of that, as far as sermon preparation, Sunday comes every week, and if you're doing sermon prep in a way that's serious, it's a lot of work. And it's a week, every single week, of just preparing for this one moment to give God's word to God's people. And it's a lot on top of all the other responsibilities, administrative things, and just all over the place. I'm not surprised by the fact that the immense stress of the job is at number one. Now let's go back really quick and talk about that one at the bottom I mentioned that just says something else, and it's at 21%. This one could have all sorts of categories in it. It could be maybe a more specific form of interpersonal relationships that aren't mentioned here that are just not going well. Maybe it could be the thing no one likes to talk about when it comes to ministry, and that is money. Maybe it's just that you're underpaid and it's hard to deal with the amount of work you're having to do in the context you're in. Now there are churches out there who can certainly afford to pay their pastors more than what they are for a living wage. And that's a shame, honestly. But then there are some that they're just smaller churches, and they would love to pay their pastor more, but they just can't. There's not enough people giving to contribute to that. And I totally, that's just reality. But there is definitely something to be said about pastoral ministry is still a job. The guys doing it still have to provide. Most of them are married with children, and they have a responsibility to them, and sometimes those pressures just overwhelm it. Maybe one of the things not mentioned here is more specifically in some of the stuff about vision and things like that is theological differences, where there was a particular theological thing that was very important to people in your church that you maybe thought was more of a secondary or third tier issue, and it turns out it's just not going to be let go like that. Yeah, I get it. There's a lot that can be said in that something else. So what's the takeaway from all this? Pastoral ministry is a different sort of vocation, period. It's just so different than anything else that's out there. You require a lot of the same skills that other jobs have. You require, it's helpful to be organized. It's helpful to be, obviously you need to be able to speak well and be able to deliver your sermon. You also need to be able to have interpersonal relationships with people and connect with people and all that. And that's where it gets a little deeper, because it's not just a 9 to 5. It's actually living among your people and connecting with them. And there's so much here. And it's so easy for us in ministry, pastors particularly, to just kind of get jaded, to not be able to see the forest for the trees sometimes, to just feel burnt out. And I truly would encourage, if that's you, keep pressing into your personal need for Christ and being in his word and seeking him out. Keep pressing into those things, because at the end of the day, your personal growth and holiness is just as much an effective thing to keep you in ministry as it is just to live life. It's how we continue to grow as people. And so a lot of these things, I think, could be avoided with good counsel, biblical devotion outside of just sermon prep, and, having friends. And here's the thing, man. I know it's easy for me to not seek friends out and to retreat into myself and just think I'm okay. I've had to learn about myself that I can't do that. My soul can't handle that. I was made to have friends. And don't be afraid to make friends in your church. You definitely need to do that, but then also outside of your church. And you may think, well, if I'm making friends in my church, I'm going to get hurt. Yeah, it happens. It's the human condition. Sometimes you have a close relationship with someone within the church and they hurt you, and it hurts. It's bad. But it's worth the risk. because Christ has called us to be together in a unified people, and that's why we have processes like church discipline and things to work stuff out. But don't be isolated. Don't be afraid to delegate with regard to the stress of the job. If there is something you're doing that you know you can pass on to someone else and it will help free you up to feel like, okay, that's one less thing I have to do. And there's a person in your church who the Lord has equipped to do that thing, pass it on. He put him there for that reason. Anyway, that's just some of my thoughts about this, guys. Ministry is hard, but it's beautiful. It's a wonderful thing, and we need more faithful pastors who are committed to doing this work. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.